This is Charlie Rose.
The great Tony Kushner is here. 20 years ago, he won the Pulitzer Prize for drama for his play Angels in America. Since then, he has been a consistent force in American theater. Ben Brantley of the New York Times once wrote, "Mr. Kushner makes words sing, swoon, and somersault as no other living American dramatist does." This past year, however, Kushner reminded audience of his skills as a screenwriter. He wrote the screenplay for Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, which has been nominated for 12 Academy Awards, including Best Adapted Screenplay. Here is the trailer for the film.
We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We can't tell our people they can vote yes on abolishing slavery unless at the same time we can tell them that you're seeking a negotiated peace.
It's either the amendment or this Confederate peace. You cannot have both.
How many hundreds of thousands have died during your administration?
Congress must never declare equal those whom God created unequal.
Leave the Constitution alone.
We're stepped out upon the world stage now, with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilt to afford us this moment. Now! Now! Now!
Abraham Lincoln has asked us to work with him to accomplish the death of slavery.
No one's ever been loved so much by the people. Don't waste that power.
This fight is for the United States of America.
Do we choose to be born, or are we fitted to the times we're born into?
Well, I don't know about myself.
All coming time, not only of the millions now in bondage, but of unborn millions to come. Shall we stop this bleeding?
I am pleased to have Tony Kushner back at this table. What does adapted screenplay mean? Because there's a lot more here than Doris's book.
Yeah, I mean, it's Steven bought the book, I think in 2000, before Doris had actually finished it. It was the book that Steven asked me to adapt. I read it eagerly, and I love it. I think it's a masterpiece. But Team of Rivals is a 900-page, four-way political biography. I mean, it's the living definition of something that isn't going to make a feature-length film. And Steven, I think, knew that when he was getting it chapter by chapter. So I think that when we say that it was adapted from Team of Rivals, what we mean is, and I think this is the credit, I'm not sure, I remember that it's inspired by Team of Rivals, which is not a dodge, really. The first time I ever encountered the story of the fight over the 13th Amendment was in Team of Rivals. I'd never read in any of the other accounts of Lincoln's life that I'd read, and I hadn't read a lot before I started working on this. Anyone who really even mentions that Lincoln did this. So it was a surprise to me to find it. So Doris gets credit for introducing me and then Steven to this incident. But, you know, when you read the major Lincoln biographies, and I feel like by now I've read all of them, you get, however many there are, 10 or 12 that I think are really significant. You get 10 or 12 different Abraham Lincolns. It's, the basic facts aren't changed, but the way that you interpret those facts, he seems to be an inexhaustibly interpretable figure. And so you sort of pick which Lincoln you want to, dramatize, and the Lincoln that Doris creates in Team of Rivals, the Lincoln that she presents, that she interprets in Team of Rivals, is a fundamentally political guy. He has other kinds of genius. He's a great writer. He's a statesman, a moral visionary. But more than anything else in Doris's book, he's a person who has an absolute consummate mastery of political process. And I found that incredibly appealing, and Steven found it incredibly appealing. So the book gave us, the field on which to embark on the journey to figure out how to dramatize this. And I worked with Doris every week, sometimes every day. I called her, emailed her.
Well, what would you email her? What would you ask her?
I would ask her if she understood why a certain event had happened, if she could understand why Lincoln said this odd thing at this particular moment. I asked her if she knew of any place that I could go to look for more details about, for instance, the bribery campaign that Lincoln, well, bribery, patronage, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. The sort of finessing of these lame duck Democrats.
The deal making to get votes.
Right, and I checked out with her when we were entering into what seemed to me to be sort of new terrain in terms of interpretation. That it felt to me that something was happening in this fight for the amendment that was actually rather significant. It wasn't a minor moment, and I felt nervous because I thought, well, why isn't it more widely known? I think the answer to that really is that it was just the 13th Amendment was completely eclipsed by the Emancipation Proclamation. But so I checked out, some of what I was reading about history, some of my understanding of it, with Doris, who's an actual historian. And we also talked to Harold Holzer and Jim McPherson. I mean, I wanted to make sure that we had a solid sense of history underneath us as we were going forward, especially when Steven said that the whole movie was just going to be the fight for the amendment, which seemed like an incredible, sort of gamble, because you wouldn't think that you're going to make a movie about one of the few things in the Lincoln years in the White House that nobody even knows about. And I wanted to make sure that we weren't just making a lot out of a very minor moment. And Doris helped me feel confident that we were onto something. She was very excited about the idea. And she's just immensely generous and has this incredible sense of enthusiasm. If you say one thing that she likes, that's great, I love that, that's great.
That's exactly.
And,
she was on this program recently.
Yeah, last night. And she's, and it's genuine. I mean, she's really a tremendously passionate person. And so that infused the script.
Two things. One, this is why Steven Spielberg is Steven Spielberg, isn't it?
You mean the decision to do this? Yeah. I mean, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I mean, he gets credit for having, this incredible instinct for what will make hugely popular entertainment, and credit for being this master,
storyteller
and camera craftsman. Right. I mean, he's invented a lot of the modern vocabulary for cinematic storytelling. But people don't really give him credit for the number of times in his career that he reinvents himself. I mean, almost movie by movie. If he needs whatever the movie demands, he sort of becomes the director. And you can always tell it's a Spielberg film. But this was a really scary thing for him to do. I mean, taking Lincoln on as a subject is scary to begin with because it's the big American subject. And we didn't know Daniel was going to play it, so we didn't know where we were going to wind up. And this decision to focus on this kind of little political procedural, once I had given him the script for it, I think was a really nervy decision. And he went to the set every day, as he did when we made Munich, scared out of it. I mean, he was scared. He said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why did I do this? I don't know what I'm doing. And you should go to work every day feeling terrified, or you're really boring yourself, and you're probably going to bore other people. I think it's amazing and incredibly moving for me to see this guy who's in his mid-60s, who's, has nothing to prove anymore to anybody, going out and saying, what haven't I done, and what would be new, and what would be tough and difficult. And, with this film, he had, all this talking, and he had to just sort of let the talking happen, and he let it happen in this incredibly skillful way.
In the conversations you have with Doris, are you seeking historical accuracy, or that plus answers to motivation and what puts someone someplace in pursuit of some goal?
It's more the latter. I mean, the issue of accuracy, I can always look up things, and I have at this point a gigantic Lincoln library, and I had
a Lincoln room.
A wonderful woman named Antonia Lasky, who was my research assistant and who helped me check and triple check everything. And so I didn't really want to burden Doris with that. A lot of it was motivation. There are moments, I mean, Lincoln is a mysterious guy who can't always tell from the historical record what he was thinking and what he was doing. And I became, as a dramatist, really eager to understand some of the weird things that happened.
Like what?
Well, for instance, in the first draft of this screenplay, which was 500 pages long, almost half the length of Team of Rivals, more than half the length of Team of Rivals, we went all the way from January 1865 to the end of his life, and we covered all 4 months in great detail. Then we wound up filming January. That's what the movie is. If you'd filmed the whole thing, it would have been a 10-hour miniseries. But at the end of the last quarter of the script dealt with Lincoln's famous trip from Washington to City Point to be with Grant for the collapse of the siege lines outside Petersburg, and then the Union conquest of Petersburg, and then the surrender of Richmond, and Lincoln's famous trip to Richmond. And I was really intrigued that most historians don't actually comment on this. When Lincoln decided to go the day after Richmond fell to Union forces, he decided to get on a boat and go up the James River to Richmond, right, and walk through the streets of Richmond. And Admiral Porter, one of his admirals who was going to take him, said, "This is a dangerous trip. It's a crazy thing to do." And Porter was really horrified when he learned that Lincoln was going to bring his son Tad, who turned 12 the day that they left. And he said to Lincoln, "You can't bring a little kid on this trip. It's criminal. I mean, we could die on this trip." He didn't want Lincoln to do it, but the idea of bringing this boy. And Lincoln said, "I can't leave him behind. It would break his heart," which is an odd thing because it really was a genuine. They sailed under Confederate forts that were still manned by soldiers who may not have heard that the war was over. I mean, or at least that Richmond had fallen, who still had guns trained on the river. Right. And I remember calling Doris and saying, "I don't understand what kind of father this is, and why don't more people talk about this? This is actually an irresponsible thing to do." We discussed it endlessly. We're still discussing it. It's a fascinating aspect of Lincoln that there's this. It's I think sort of emblematic of his relationship to his sons and to the world. This incredible compassion. He was just thinking of the world from Tad's point of view and thinking he'd just be crushed if I left him behind, and sort of abrogating his responsibility as a parent to take care of this kid at the same time, and also being somewhat removed from focused on something else. He had a mission to go to Richmond, and not quite connected to the specifics of what he was about to do. And there's that quality to Lincoln that I found really fascinating. So, there were issues like that just came up over. I mean, I still don't understand how Lincoln thought it was a good idea to make Andrew Johnson his second vice president. He had a perfectly good one. Yeah. He got rid of him in the 1864 election and asked this guy, who clearly was not going to be great after the war in terms of Reconstruction and slavery, freed slaves, and Lincoln had been shot at many times before he was actually killed. No president had been assassinated, but he knew it was a possibility. So it seems to me difficult to understand how he could have made the mistake of...
So what conclusion did you come to?
I think he sometimes this is the only thing I'll ever say critical of Abraham Lincoln. I think he sometimes his ability to strategize. I think there was also an obsession behind it. He was absolutely terrified of losing the '64 election, and he was right to be, because George McClellan as president in November of '64, and it came close. If Sherman hadn't taken Atlanta, McClellan probably could have won. And Lincoln was doing everything he could to keep the Republican Party together and to make sure that he got reelected. And I think that Johnson was from Tennessee. He was a loyal Union guy. And Lincoln thought, this will pull in the border states. This will calm down the Democrats.
Kennedy chose Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah. Well, and people have chosen vice presidents for in the case of Kennedy, he picked somebody who turned out to be, with the exception of the Vietnam War, a very great president.
A man ready to be president.
Yes, absolutely. And somebody with, but Johnson famously was possibly drunk when he gave his inaugural speech. The vice presidents used to give them in the floor of the Senate in the 19th century, and Johnson was either in a panic or was drunk and gave an incoherent speech and sort of announced to everybody that he was going to be bad news, and he turned out to be
bad news.
Really, really bad news. And I think that Lincoln didn't need to worry as much as he was worried, but he wanted to make sure that he had every angle covered, and so he made a mistake.
So when the time you first, you obviously knew something about Lincoln when you began this project, whenever that was. I mean, when was that?
2006.
Steven calls you up.
He called me. We had finished making Munich.
Which I love, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Abe, I mean, just that dinner, that lunch scene out in the country was enough for me.
Isn't that?
Right
That's a great. That's so beautifully filmed. I really love it. I had a blast making Munich with him. I just loved it, and we had to deal with a lot of sort of criticism from people who about Israel and stuff afterwards, and we found that it was, in a way, it wasn't fun doing that, but we were in the trenches together for a little while, responding to things and standing by our position. Or the position of the film, standing by the film. And we became, I think, close in a certain sense, and we just enjoyed working with each other. So he asked me about 2 months after the Oscars were done that year if I'd like to take a look at what he was thinking about with Lincoln. And I said no. And I said no for about 6 months. And then
why'd you say no?
Because, it's Abraham Lincoln. And I thought, what we were just talking about, you want to understand motives, you want to understand what's going on inside the heads of characters that you create. And I have no hope of ever really understanding how Abraham Lincoln did what he did, any more than I have of understanding how Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, or Mozart wrote Don Giovanni, or George Eliot wrote Middlemarch. I don't know. I can't understand that. These people are geniuses. They have a function on a higher plane than most people, and if I knew how to write Hamlet, I would write Hamlet.
Exactly.
And then we'd have something to talk about. Yeah. But we
have a lot to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about, but I can't write Hamlet any more than a chimp can write Hamlet. So I thought this is just going to be a losing proposition. All I can do is fail.
Who needs this?
And who needs it? And it's just, and who's going to play Lincoln? And how is he not going to look like a guy in a used car commercial on President's Day? And people are going to laugh. And then about 6 months later, Stephen and Kathy Kennedy and Doris pulled together what they described to me on the phone as a little meeting of a few Lincoln historians at the St. Regis Hotel. And they'd like me to come, and I can ask them any question I want. And I get to the hotel, and it's this giant conference table, and there are 20 of the country's leading Lincolnists there, including James McPherson. And I had read Battle Cry of Freedom and was just, like, oh my God, it's James McPherson, and Harold Holzer. I mean, all these guys, Michael Burlingame, Douglas Wilson. It was sort of Gabor Boret, all these people, and Doris. And we spent 6 hours, I think, just asking them. And I got to hear them talk. And I was as moved and excited by the information as I was equally moved by the way they spoke to each other, because we've all been to academic conferences where people really go after each other, and you've got a thesis and I'm going to just, tear your head off. These people were so respectful of one another's work and genuinely grateful and appreciative. And there was Doris, whose book was going to be made into a Spielberg movie, and it was this huge hit. And you'd think there'd be envy, and there wasn't. They were really supportive of her. Yeah. They were properly deferential to McPherson, and it was very moving. And I thought, well, the spirit of the man that these people are studying has really infused them. And then Doris, as soon as we were done, said the thing that really sort of turned the key. I said, I still don't want to do this, Doris. I don't think I'm going to succeed. I can't do it. And she said, listen, I felt that way when I started Team of Rivals. I don't know whether you'll fail or succeed. But I can only promise you one thing: you will never regret any of the time that you spend with Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
And I thought, well, what a great thing to say.
So at the end of when you finished and made the movie, what did you think you knew about Lincoln you did not really know before?
The thing that I think changed me, and it was a great privilege and blessing to work on this during the Obama years. I started during the Bush years, but by the time I figured out how to do the screenplay, it was already 2007. And by the time I got Steven the first draft, we were a few months away from the election, the 2008 election. And I've been working on Lincoln all through the first term of office the President Obama's had. And, I consider myself a person of the left. And I have left impatience with the pace of change, and I'm aware that people suffer terribly while they're waiting for change to happen. The most vulnerable people suffer the most terribly. And I'm a gay man, and I've been waiting a long time for, full enfranchisement, and I'm still not there. But watching this president and reading about that president, I really began to think long and hard about the processes of electoral democracy and the pace of change in an electoral democracy and what's possible. They're not the same people by any means, and the situation is not the same. But I think you could argue that Barack Obama faced in 2008 a situation, as bad as any president since the Great Depression. Nothing is as bad as what Lincoln arrived in Washington to face. The country was literally disintegrating. The Navy was staffed by people who were all leaving with their boats for the South. I mean, it was a nightmare. But what Obama inherited from the Bush administration is, we all remember, as just an absolute global catastrophe on every level. And I think he's done an astonishing job beginning to turn that around. And like Lincoln, there's been an enormous amount of criticism of our president, our current president, from the left in terms of that comes from an impatience with you said that you were, going to do this, and you said you were going to do that. Why hasn't it happened? And the fact of the matter is that when you're elected president of the United States rather than king of the United States, you have to work with a very cumbrous, unwieldy machinery.
Something that Abraham Lincoln really understood.
And he really understood it. And 150 years later, people are still misreading his motives. They still misread all the statements that he would take the South back with all of its slaves in chains as being, a true expression of his desire. This man who signed both the Emancipation Proclamation and, even though presidents don't sign an amendment, he signed the 13th Amendment because he was proud of it. There's still some question about whether or not Lincoln really wanted to free slaves. There's no question about that. He said those things because he was trying to keep the border states which were loyal to the Union but still had slaves from going over to the Confederacy. And these kind of compromises that are necessary to make change happen, I think it deepened my faith in democracy. I think it made me feel more than ever that this system actually can work. And that if you believe in the people.
But it has pushes and pulls and deals.
I got to say this to the president when we went to the White House with the movie. What I think he's done that Lincoln did was to constantly articulate for the people, while making sausages, while making these compromises, the place that we're ultimately headed for. I think that he's been very careful to say that he rejects the idea that government is evil. I mean, I just saw a U.S. senator standing on the floor of the U.S. Senate talking about taming the beast. And it's like, you're a U.S. senator. This is not the beast. This is the federal government of the United States of America. It's appalling for a U.S. senator to describe the government as a beast. And I think that Obama has made a very determined and conscious effort to keep saying over and over again, government is not the enemy. Government is an expression of, the better angels of our nature. Government is our way of, as a society, of expressing ourselves in history, in historical time, in action. And that's immensely important.
The definition of the role of government is an ongoing theme of American politics.
So you have people like these Tea Party people protesting government and then asked if they really want to give up their Social Security payments, and they don't seem to know that that's actually part of what government is. There's a rejection of the sort of basic idea of human community behind the Reagan era ideology that is really frightening and that leads us to terrible, terrible places. And now that we're facing challenges like climate change that absolutely demand a global collective response, an organized global collective response, we have no hope for survival as a species if we continue down the path of this kind of psychotic individualism. The individual is very important, but just as important to human beings is our relational capacity. And I think that it's slowly turning around. I think we're beginning to see. In the last election, we saw, I think, a real rejection. I mean, what Romney basically had to offer was the same old trickle-down nonsense, and people said, I don't believe it anymore.
Do you think we have come 90% of the way on same-sex marriage?
Well, not 90%. I mean, we're still...
Well, 50, 60?
I don't know where we are yet.
Okay, but we're somewhere that we were not 4 years ago in terms of the body politic.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's been amazing progress. Some of it, I think, due to the president. I also got to say to him at the White House that I thought the way he handled same-sex marriage was Lincolnian. I mean, he started out in 2008 saying, I don't believe that marriage should only... He said, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman, but I'm evolving. And that was clearly code to anybody with a brain saying, of course I believe in same-sex marriage. He's a constitutional law scholar. He understands the difference.
But the cynics among the left did not like that.
Well, people took him at his word, read him literally, which we shouldn't do. You interpret. Barack Obama clearly is a progressive person who understands the difference between secular marriage, government, sanctioned marriage, and religious institutions. So the idea that he was, but as an African-American man running for president in 2008, maybe he thought he couldn't add to that also that he was going to come out in favor of same-sex marriage. He picked the moment to say it, and he picked exactly the right moment to say it. And when he said it, he also included lesbian families headed by lesbians and gay men, and so he moved it not just to the area of marriage, but to the area of families and adoption as well. And he picked the right moment because it never became an issue in the election.
Angels in America. 20 years since you first put it on stage.
I'm old.
Yes.
I was young when I first came on the show.
What is it about it that you think has so resonated?
I think you can interpret it in a number of different ways. So I think it can be read as a very political play. Harold Bloom thinks it's a theological play. Yeah. I think when Mike Nichols made the film version of it, he really read it in a very specific, as a very specific personal drama. And I think you can take it in different ways, and I think that's helped it survive. Apparently, it has a lot of appeal to young people. It's taught in colleges a lot, and that's given it a long life, I think. And I think it's connected to a moment, a watershed moment in history. It didn't in any way create that moment, but I mean, it arrived just at the point at which the country was beginning to get ready, or was actually beginning to face up to what had happened in the 80s with the epidemic. There's a fantastic documentary. It's nominated for an Oscar called How to Survive a Plague. It's just a brilliant history of ACT UP and the Treatment and Action Group, which is a subset of ACT UP, and how they really very scrupulously parse how ACT UP changed the nature of the face of the epidemic, the nature of the epidemic. But it's, those times, which seem very distant now, the country did not face up to its responsibility, and Angels arrived at a moment when it was starting to take stock of that, and also people needed a place to mourn, and there's a certain amount of grieving in the play.
And it was a play you had to write.
Yeah, I mean, it was, or I guess it was the play I wrote.
Yeah. So what do you, when you look forward from this day, so Angels is 20 years old, Lincoln is a year old. So what's the great obsession for you?
I think that's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I think America is one. I mean, Angels is subtitled Gay Fantasia on National Themes, and there is an attempt in the play, even though it's 30 years old when I wrote it, to try and think about this country and what the democratic experiment means. And I remember, I think I read this in Gary Wills first in his wonderful book, Lincoln at Gettysburg, which was before I started writing, thinking about the movie. I think it's in Lincoln at Gettysburg, that Seward was annoyed with Lincoln's use of the word dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, that he thought it was a chilly, clinical word. But it's exactly the right word. I mean, the people that died at Gettysburg, Lincoln says, testing whether, this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And he wasn't speaking fancifully. Democracy in 1865 was still a question. And it's still a question today. I mean, I know so many people that woke up on election morning, where I live on the Upper West Side at any rate, woke up thinking, oh my God, what if at the end of the night we have Mitt Romney as president? And, what does that say about the American people? And what, is democracy a bad idea is what you start to think, Or have the people been so misled and bamboozled that they would elect this really unworthy, sorry, Mitt, but I think a person not worthy of the office, and not re-elect this guy who I think is one of our great presidents, and you get reconfirmed in your faith. But it's still a question. I mean, you know, God doesn't really guarantee the existence of our country. No divine right of kings does. We sort of made it up and we keep it going. And I think that's fascinating. And the question of, you know, endless national definition interests me. So I think that that's the thing that probably joins those two. And pretty much everything that I did in between is, you know.
So America is your subject.
I think so. I'm also really interested in change, in the question of time and change. And, you know, my last play, The Intelligent Homosexual's Guide to Capitalism and Socialism, it was very much about this. It's, you know, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, Karl Marx, of all people in England, said Abraham Lincoln has now changed this conflict from a civil war to a revolution. And Lincoln actually said similar things, or, you know, and there's a deep place in the popular imagination, especially the left imagination, for revolution. It's Walter Benjamin likens it to the anticipation of the Messiah coming. And it's an enormously important part of the imagination, and I don't think we can ever get rid of it, nor should we. But there is a question about whether or not historical change that happens in a fracturing, what kind of transformation that is, and whether or not a slower, more carefully built transformation is not better. And I don't know the answer to that, but that torments me, and I think about that a great deal, evolution versus revolution. And I think that that's been one of the overarching themes of the stuff that I'm interested in.
Thank you for coming, Tony.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure always.